Hello and welcome to April's edition of the Leading Female Executive LinkedIn Live discussion. We are a few executives down today as we are in an extremely busy time period. As you know, the brilliant women who join me each month are from all over the world. Now, if they had all been UK-based, I would have guessed that they would have been all in the pub, but it is a big day here in Britain as we've reached another milestone of the lockdown easing. So I thought I'd mention that as it's such a great day here. Now, if you are new to these sessions, they happen once a month and I am joined by brilliant executives to talk about the hottest topics, challenges and opportunities. And of course, if you have any topics you would like to suggest, please feel free to message me or email over at bod@criniumgroup.com. Now, this month's panel is all about engineered decision intelligence. Now, I think most of us in this discussion, we're going to be basing our idea as how Gartner has positioned this, which is that decision intelligence is a discipline that includes a wide range of decision making, including conventional analytics, AI, and complex adaptive system applications. Now, engineering decision intelligence applies to sequences of decisions and even networks of emergent decision making rather than just individual decisions. So joining me to chat about all of this today, and I will get them up in front of us, is the lovely Maritza Curry, Joanne Stonia and Beza Bota. Now, for the benefit of the audience, ladies, I will invite you to each just quickly give an introduction to yourself. Maritza, if you'd like to intro yourself first.
Hi everyone, I'm Maritza Curry. I am the head of data at RCS Group in South Africa. We are owned by BNP Paribas Personal Finance, and within the BNP data community, I represent South Africa as the Chief Data Officer.
Amazing, Maritza. Thank you so much for joining us today. Joanne, lovely to see you again. If you could introduce yourself, please.
Sure. So hello, everyone. And again, Catherine, congratulations on the lifting of the lockdown in the UK. I'm Joanne Stonia. I'm the Chief Data Officer for MasterCard. I'm located here in New York, and my responsibilities are for the entire firm, for the enterprise. Thanks.
Amazing. And then last but certainly not least, Beza, lovely to see you. If you'd like to give an intro.
Absolutely. Pleasure to see everybody. My name is Beza Bota. I'm the Chief Data Officer for Mercy First. I also serve as the Chief Compliance, and now I'm also the Chief Analytics Officer for Feedback Research Institute. So quite busy.
Amazing. Well, thank you, ladies, for sparing this 30 minutes with us. I'm really, really excited about this topic. And I know you guys were passionate about it just before we hit live. I was about to say hit record, but we are live. On to my next point, which is if you have questions, please pop them into the comment section, because this is exactly why we do this session live. We used to do it recorded and we used to put it out onto LinkedIn, but actually the feedback we got was that you'd love to be able to interact with the brilliant executives that we bring on. So with that, pop those comments, pop those questions. Thank you, Matt, for your comment. Looking forward to this one, certainly have. So this is a really interesting topic. I'd say it's probably ambitious topics that we've spoken about on the monthly panels, in a sense of we're all on different journeys. So I guess the first question I have is, where are you on this journey for engineered decision intelligence in your organization? Have you employed it? Where are you on that journey? So Beza, I'll come to you first for that one.
So we have some proof of concepts as far as what we are calling measurement feedback systems. So I work in the space of healthcare and human services. And we had a proof of concept where we integrated different types of data points, and actually for our clinicians and our primary care providers provided not only timelines, but feedback as far as decision making. So that proof of concept worked really well, but we're still in the pilot and the testing phase for a lot of the applications that we're developing, including the measurement feedback systems. So what we would like to do is actually augment the decisions of the physicians. I know that there is a challenge, in any sort of decision science that, especially for our very highly trained clinicians and physicians and others in the healthcare sphere, that it's getting a lot of information for a patient and client in a way that highlights the risks for that patient, and allowing the physician to sort of glance at that information, observe it very differently, and then take that information into their decision-making process, not necessarily influencing their decision, but it's sort of another tool that kind of surfaces information for them. So we're still early in that process. The feedback that we have gotten from a lot of our physicians is that they really love this approach. I think almost all of us have gotten used to having information at our fingertips very differently. So it's definitely, something, especially in the world of Siri and just asking questions and getting that, instant feedback in a dynamic world that we live in. I think, having those decision support systems are key for any sort of, decision making, especially in the field that I work for, healthcare.
Amazing. I love that comparison to Siri, actually. And I think that's such a great cultural note of how immediate we like our answers and how accessible we like our answers and decisions as well. Fantastic. Well, Beza, thank you for setting the scene there for Mersey first. Now, Joanne, how about you over at MasterCard? Where are you on this journey for engineered decision intelligence? What does that look like for you and your organization?
So we are probably a little bit behind Beza, but we are looking at the technique and the tool as well. We have just started, so when I got the topic, I thought, well, this is going to be interesting because we're just starting to really look at it as another layer of insight. And I think Beza did a great job of explaining it as kind of another layer of information about how does the organization make decisions and how can we kind of add consistency to our practice, right? So if you take the example of all of the decisions that get made during a fraud analysis or a cyber analysis for us, can we begin to look at all of the steps in the process and come up with kind of a proof of concept? So we're just beginning to look at that, but it's beginning to make us really go all the way throughout our data practices to make sure that we have the right observational information so that we can perform the right investigation and then harmonize the models in the right context. So there's a lot of steps to this to do it right. And then, of course, artificial intelligence just adds another layer of complexity of information to try to add that in. So I'm finding myself wishing that we had started this journey a little bit concurrently with some of our AI and machine learning work. So it's really fascinating, though. It makes you observe your own decision-making abilities inside your organization and try to figure out how do you layer in the science to that. And so I do think it's going to generate more insights as well as more consistency in our data practices.
Fantastic. Now, this is why I always love the group of executives who join me for these panels, because they're not just sharing the successes, but lesson learned there, as Joanne says, in the sense of where you'd wished you'd started a journey, or perhaps, hindsight offers different ways. So if you're sat here in the audience writing notes, make sure you're taking note of these lessons learned as well. So Maritza, round us off on this first intro question then. Where are you on this journey?
So very early days. So decision intelligence, it's been around for a while and more mature, but engineered decision intelligence, definitely very early days, sort of just starting to look at where the use cases are and how we can implement it as part of our data strategy. But previous companies that I've worked for, especially in retail, it was a little bit more mature. We didn't call it engineered decision intelligence 3 or 4 years ago. But, this is an old problem that we are trying to resolve. And the problem is to support decision-making across the business value chain, and to support causal decision-making. And we've been trying to resolve this problem or solve this problem for decades. And as Joanne said, with the inclusion of AI into our data strategies now, it's made the problem even more complex. So in retail, because the business value chain and those causal relationships across the business value chain has such a big impact on the success of the business. I think we've been doing it in one way or another, in retail, but we just didn't call it engineered decision intelligence. We just called it, business intelligence and, supporting decision making. So very early days for us, but certainly we've got some use cases that we're looking at.
Absolutely. I think you've touched on a really interesting point there as well, Maritza, that actually the semantic way that we use our language around these topics can be very important as well, to clarify that within your own teams, your department, organization, to make sure that you are all singing from the same hymn sheet, because you can say AI, but that could mean 100 different things. Same with what we just discussed here. So I think that's actually a really that you mentioned there, Maritza. Thank you. So we've taken stock of where we are on this journey. Now, when it comes to embracing something new, it's often in the idea and realization that there is a challenge, a barrier, a problem, or something that it's being sought to solve. So what challenges do you see in the journey ahead that you think that engineered decision intelligence can really help to solve, or at least partly alleviate those symptoms of those challenges and barriers? So Joanne, I'll come to you first for that one.
Well, I think that what we've learned in the past year, right, is that we are connected ecosystems, right? I mean, we've been operating a connected ecosystem for many, many years, but we were one that we understood. And now that we are heading to a multi-rail type of environment at MasterCard, we do need to understand decisions in a different way. And so I think that this science really begins to help us understand that we need consistency as we look at, for example, open banking or using our rails for digital identity. And so are we, as we engage with different organizations in a different way, are we understanding that the consistency of information and the consistency in the decisions at different points of articulation? And so trying to make sure that you have the data management and governance and labeling done in a way that makes sense for these decisions, so that you can apply it in again, that key word of engineered decision intelligence, right? You can do decision intelligence, but can you do it in such a way that it really can be contextualized in the right way going forward, is part of the trick to this. And so, we're talking about proof of concepts, but trying to get your proof of concept right so that it can be expanded into additional use cases, I think is one of the challenges that we're all going to actually come to if we want to do this on a very, very large scale.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Beza, how about yourself? What challenges in your department, in your organization, do you decision intelligence is going to look to solve, or at least try to?
So I think Joanne kind of raised a really important point as far as sort of understanding the connected ecosystems. So what decision does one physician or provider make that affects the decision of somebody else? So in my example, it would be, let's say you have a patient that goes in for cancer care. So they're seen by multiple physicians. So decision making in one area actually impacts decision making in another area. And everything is interconnected, as we are learning in the COVID world, but kind of highlights that, even organizational. So understanding, causal decision pathways and how that impacts decision along that chain is really important. And for us to sort of looking at a lot of the new technologies that are coming to fore, such as process mining within the organizations, understanding not only processes, but systems, and how decisions get made across those pathways. What are the blockage points? What are the critical decision points at different junctions? And how can you automate that or highlight that so that in a way you have a much more, an ecosystem that flows better. And there's a transparency in the decision making across the different types of processes. I think that's where we're seeing a lot of the work currently.
And I think what the healthcare industry does is it really puts it into a context that I think all of us understand, in a sense of, you're not going to see one doctor necessarily. You'll end up seeing a consultant and then a nurse and then a doctor, and that process in a very physical sense, so you can apply it in this context, which I think is really special about that example given as well. Thank you so much, Beza. And then Maritza, how about you? What challenges down the road can you see already, or the challenges you can at least predict?
So I'm going to add on to what Joanne and Beza said around sort of just shifting silo thinking to more integrated thinking across your or the business value chain. So that's definitely a challenge that we're going to have to solve, is to make that shift. And Joanne mentioned earlier how complex this is to actually understand the decision pathways and how complex it is to implement it in an engineered way. So I think one of the other challenges is definitely going to be understanding or unraveling the complexity of the business processes, but also the decision-making processes in the organization. And then I think the last challenge is going to be the information design component of it. I mean, that's quite a specialized skill, which we don't necessarily have in our organizations. So that's an emerging skill that we're going to have to either nurture in our organizations as part of this initiative, or we're going to have to find it in the market.
That's a really good point.
I was just about to say, Joanne, it's a fantastic point, isn't it? Go for it.
It is. I mean, so Maritza makes a really valuable point. I was going to make a different point, but when she brings that up, and it's funny, I was having a conversation earlier today about skill sets, right? And while we can find the decision science skill set, right, and we can find the data science skill set for the pathways, I think that's something that engineers are very good at, right? Because we can understand causal. But I think when we're designing the information set, right, and the consistency that's needed to then implement, there's a data design skill set, right, that for the consistency. And this is beyond simple data management, right? This is beyond simple taxonomy. This is pretty extensive data design work that needs to be done so that it has a sustainable factor, so that you can add new pathways, right, as things change. So I do think that that's there's a little bit of an iterative process to this that you have to be conscious of as you're beginning to build, and that you need both ends to be really working together as you're building this out. So Maritza, I think that's a fabulous point. What I was going to say, because both Beza and Maritza mentioned this too, in the process piece, because all three of us have mentioned AI. AI as a tool, right, also has amplification of decisions, right? And so an amplification of both positive decisions and also incorrect decisions. And so one of the reasons that we're finding it a little bit challenging is when you hit a process or a pathway that has AI and machine learning in it, you have to kind of tread carefully so that you can make sure that you don't have amplification of that decision. You need to really look at that chain, that pathway, to understand both its inputs and outputs and where those pathways lead you. Because the direct pathway it was designed for is probably fine, but if there's any other offshoots off of it, you need to understand that. And so that's one of the additional new complexities, I think, that this tool in tandem with AI and machine learning that we're beginning to understand and look at. So we're going slow, Catherine, on this methodology, because I think there's some real benefits here. And I think Beza's example is a beautiful one, right? I mean, I think we can all understand the desire to have our physicians all work together, especially on a complex case like cancer treatment, right? But also, though, when you add into the mix a sophisticated tool, how important it is to really think through what the causation might be.
So,
absolutely. Beza, do you want to come back on that?
Yeah, no, as Joanne mentioned, I think it's really critical sort of thinking as far as, the skill set that needs, to be built in this area. So there's a new field that's emerging within decision science. Actually, it's a very, very old field. It's just getting new legs because of different types of technologies that are out there. So understanding the causal pathway. So decision science has been around since the 70s, even earlier than that. But now I think with the new technologies, started artificial intelligence, machine learning, and many others, creating sort of digital twins or organizations, process mining, that there's different tools. And I think for us, it's important to understand how those tools are implemented. That's where I mentioned transparency as far as decision making. And if you are engineering those systems in a way that makes it very seamless, you really have to build auditing processes to understand if all is equal, this decision came, what would be alternate decision? And I know Joanne sort of raised the issue of bias within our data. Our data is biased. And sort of understanding that when a decision surfaces or the system surfaces a decision that says, based on this radiology, in my example, radiology sort of assessment, what does it mean for this patient? What does the AI see? Obviously, AI is picking up, and you've seen this in news. I'm not sure that is able to diagnose cancer much earlier. It's able to pick up certain things that physicians are not able to diagnose until much later. Are we actually seeing that, or are we seeing an artifact within the data? And we have to be very careful that, in a way, if we start treating a patient much earlier for something that hasn't materialized yet, that are we in the right pathway? Do we take that, sort of at face value, prima facie, and start treating this patient, to sort of prevent that? Or do we, wait a little bit more and get additional data points to validate before we do that? So I think, in my world, it's much more apparent that whatever decisions you make is sort of life and death, and you have to be very careful. But what we're finding is that a lot of these tools have permeated our, arena, obviously with the goal to sort of improve health. Who doesn't want that? But always in the back of my mind, worry that, yes, we're diagnosing it, but are we actually seeing what we're thinking we're seeing? And the research has become much more sophisticated in the data science field, that it's getting really close to that proof of concept where we're seeing this replicated over and over again in large healthcare systems. So the systems are getting better, but I don't think the whole aspect of replacing thought and human cognition in a way. I think it's augmenting that in a way that kind of raises awareness of additional things to look at, but not completely replaces the human in the chain process.
Absolutely. So we've just had a question come in over on LinkedIn. So thank you, Tapas, for writing into us. That's brilliant. Now, Tapas asks, what is the trust level value, high, medium, or low, observed for data set produced by the AI for respective taxonomy? Can we trust AI generated data values and no manual intervention by data stewards or data specialists, or are data specialists required? Pretty beefy question there. Would any of you like to jump in on that one? Joanne, do you want to
Joanne, I can go, and Bessie, you can back clean up if you want. I think we're going to be probably very similar. Look, I think for all of us, we have an AI governance process, right? I think the point that we're trying to make is that AI adds complexity to the decision intelligence cycle, right, and to the pathway. But for AI in and of itself, right, so the observational data sets that are produced from AI, I think all of us have really robust governance processes that absolutely make us look at both the input data, also the actual structure of the AI, and then the output. And within those contexts, there's a lot of, at least at MasterCard, an awful lot of human intervention and review by both the data science community as well as by the data steward community, the data governance teams. And even beyond that, and within the context of building out whatever the algorithmic process is, we have an entire governance process, depending upon the context, depending upon how individually impactful the AI is going to be, so that we are looking at the potential for harms to the individual. So this is a conversation, that is continuously evolving, but I doubt that many firms are just deploying AI without any kind of review. It doesn't work well that way. You wind up with all sorts of funky things. Even just monitoring drift is its own science now. And I think we're getting better and better at it. The more we deploy the tool, the more we understand our data sets, and the more we understand the applications of it. So I don't think that AI works without human intervention, not at this point, partly because we understand that we're at the generation where the machines are learning, and they're learning based on what we're teaching them, and that we have to be really careful on what we're teaching them.
Amazing. Joanne, I would suggest the audience are in total agreement with what you're saying, because I'm seeing a fluttering of clapping hands and likes on LinkedIn Live next to me here. So, Beza, did you want to jump in to add on anything before I ask the final question of today?
No, absolutely. I love what Joanne said, that the algorithms are learning. In a way, it's sort of, at this point, we have a toddler. So whatever you teach the toddler, that's what the adult grows up. In our world, in the healthcare world, a lot of the AI decision science usually are ran in different projects with different studies or randomized controlled trials. So in a way, they're being studied as they're being deployed to see what outcomes they have. So there is already a research component to any sort of deployment, that are we seeing what we're seeing? So most of the AI builds or AI deployment, it's not en masse, but at this point in time, they're being deployed in a way where there is a research component that tries to understand how does it integrate within the environment, what is the decisions that are coming out of this tool, how is that incorporated into the decision of the physician or the clinician, what are potential outcomes as part of those studies. So I don't think we have deployed, I think it's kind of early where we are deploying en masse the decision-making systems. I mean, if you think of algorithm systems, and where it's like a sort of recommender system within like Netflix and others, they're a little bit more benign than I would, in higher risk sort of organizations like, MasterCard, where your financial data, is at risk, or your healthcare data, that you have to be a little bit more cautious. Whatever, I get recommended within Amazon, that's great, sort of matching my preferences, but it's not a sort of a critical life decisions that I really have to ensure that whatever's decision coming out, that it's not going to have the harm that, in research, we have the whole point of beneficence. So to ensure that whatever decisions are being couched in sound information, including, understanding all of the biases, including negative outcomes that can potentially come out of that decision.
Amazing. Now we are rapidly running out of time, and it always makes me laugh that we've been live for all this time, and this is when all the questions come in. So Ryan, I've seen your question. Given the depth of the answer that I know these fantastic executives will want to give, I'm not going to ask it. Instead, I'm going to link you to the executives that are joining me on the stage, Beza, Maritza, and Joanne, so they can message you afterwards, because they are going to want to give depth to you. They're going to want to serve and add value to you. And that's going to take us way over the time that we have today. Yogesh, you are more than welcome. And Tapas, again, he says, thank you so much for my response with 4 exclamation marks. So I think we've served him some value today. And we are just about a minute to go. So really, really quickly for me, ladies, what I would love to know, given that you are all on the start of your journey, at least, there will be some members in the audience who aren't on the journey at all, and they're looking to start it. What would be your recommendation to those who are literally just getting in the car to jump on the road to this area? Joanne, I'll come to you first.
Take your time, pick your proof of concept idea carefully, and make sure that you can map out a good value chain of the decisions first manually, so that you understand what you're going after, so that you can understand what are the data points that you're going to need before you begin to kind of take on the project. Because it's not going to just be a kind of data office project. It's going to involve your business teams. It's going to involve a lot of your technology folks. And so you want to understand kind of all of the pathways, and you want to be able to map those out. So actually we've done quite a bit of whiteboarding, if you will, even in the virtual world, to understand kind of what was the best proof of concept before we actually took this on. And we rejected quite a few because we wanted to start out with something that wasn't too simple, but also something that wasn't too overblown with too many complexities and too many pathways, so that we could do a fair amount of learning. So pick that wisely, and make sure it's something that adds business value to your organization as well.
Amazing, Joanne. Always wonderful to have you on these monthly panels. Thank you so much. Maritza, how about you? What is your recommendation to those people who are packing their bags to start on this wonderful journey? What do you think they need to take on to begin this successfully?
I can only agree with Joanne. Simplicity and focus. I think there's definitely an opportunity here to over-engineer. So agree with Joanne, be very careful about the use case you choose and make sure that the use case is linked to your organization's core capability, because the outcome is also important. So understand what that outcome is going to be, and understand what are the decisions across the value chain that's going to give you that specific outcome.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Maritza. And again, a huge pleasure to have you joining us every month. And then Beza, finally us off, what is your recommendation?
So I know that we're all interested in high tech, but sometimes low tech options are really important. So start with low tech options. Understands your business flows, your business processes, decision making. You know, simple flow charts that I learned in engineering school as far as how information flows and how decisions are made. I think starting there and mapping them out manually before you digitize them or automate them. So then, as Joanne mentioned, that you have a proof of concept or a project that you work on or digitize, but also you have a good understanding of what your system looks like before you move into more expensive options. Sometimes those low tech options work, and starting off from there before you run off and purchase different products. I think it's key.
I love that. Really great. Well, thank you, ladies. As always, an absolute pleasure to have you join us. And just like that, we have run out of time. There's never enough time for these topics, but thank you so much for joining us. And thank you for your questions as well. And like I said, the ladies will get back to you with their answers for sure. Now, a few items to note before I let you go today. We have extended our advisory board by 5 seats. So if you would be interested in joining the Business of Data Global Advisory Board, please check the pinned post of the page that is currently live here at the Business of Data, and you can either nominate an executive who you think would make a fantastic advisor or nominate yourself. The nominating self form takes about 10 minutes if you do it absolutely properly, so not too much time at all. Do make sure you're following us on socials and subscribing as well. And coming up tomorrow, we have the Business of Data show, the final episode of our introductory season, with season 1 kicking off very soon in a couple weeks time as well.